Who's actually going to get the most out of this machine? Who can safely walk away? And does the price make sense for someone who just wants solid 1080p gaming without breaking the bank? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I've spent the last few weeks setting this PC up in a small dorm room, a home office, and a living room gaming nook, so I can tell you what it feels like to live with it day to day and whether it lives up to the hype that a gamer Xtreme VR name promises. First off, let's talk about the kind of person who should be eyeing this rig. If you're a student or a young professional who wants to game after work, stream a few hours on Twitch, or dip into VR titles like Beat Saber without having to juggle a tower of components, this system fits that niche. It ships pre-built, runs Windows 11 out of the box, and includes a decent 500GB NVMe drive that loads games in seconds. The 16GB of DDR4 RAM means you won't be swapping memory when you have a browser open alongside a game, and the Wi-Fi module lets you skip the mess of Ethernet cables if your room is cramped. In short, the everyday buyer who wants a plug-and-play experience gets a lot of value here. Now for the folks who should probably keep scrolling. If you're a competitive esports player who demands ultra-high frame rates at 1440p or 4K, the RTX 3050 is going to feel like a ceiling you'll bump into fast. It's solid for 1080p, but you'll start to see the occasional dip when you crank settings to ultra in newer titles like Cyberpunk 2077 or Elden Ring. Also, the 500GB SSD will fill up quickly if you keep a library of large AAA games. You'll end up adding a secondary drive or external storage sooner rather than later. Lastly, anyone who's planning on heavy content creation, think 4K video editing or AI-assisted rendering, should consider a system with a more powerful GPU and a larger storage pool. From a practical standpoint, the first thing you notice when you pull the box open is the clean, all-black chassis. It's not a massive tower, so it slides under a desk without hogging space. The front panel has a single USB-C port, a couple of USB-A ports, and a power button that feels solid. Setting it up was a matter of plugging in the monitor, keyboard, mouse, and if you want VR your headset, then powering it on. The system boots into Windows 11 in roughly 10 seconds thanks to that NVMe drive, and the first game you launch Fortnite was ready to play in under a minute. That instant start feeling is one of the biggest practical strengths. You're not waiting for a long HDD spin-up or a sluggish OS. Gaming performance is where the specs start to matter, but the real test is how the PC behaves under a typical gaming session. I ran Valorant at 1080p with settings maxed out. The frame rate hovered around 140 frames per second, which is more than enough for a 144Hz monitor. In a more demanding title like Shadow of the Tomb Raider, I had to dial the texture quality down a notch to keep the frame rate above 60 frames per second. The RTX 3050 handles ray tracing, but only if you're okay with turning DLSS on and sacrificing some visual fidelity. For most casual gamers, that trade-off is acceptable, but it's something to keep in mind if you're chasing that everything on max look. One hidden trade-off is the cooling solution. The case uses a single 120mm rear fan and a modest front intake. In a small room with limited airflow, the system can get a bit noisy during extended play sessions. Think a steady hum that rises when you're in a boss fight. It's not ear-shattering, but if you're sensitive to background noise while you're streaming or studying, you might want to add an extra fan or reposition the PC for better ventilation. The good news is the chassis is designed for easy upgrades, so swapping in a better cooler later isn't a nightmare. Speaking of upgrades, the motherboard is a standard ATX layout that gives you room to add another SSD or a larger HDD without opening the case completely. The power supply is a 500W unit, enough for the current components but not much headroom if you plan to drop in a top-tier RTX 3070 or higher down the line. In that sense, the system is future-proof for modest upgrades like moving to a 1TB SSD or adding more RAM, but not for a full-blown high-end GPU overhaul. Connectivity is another area where the PC earns points. In addition to Wi-Fi 6, you get a gigabit Ethernet port if you prefer a wired connection for lower latency. The back panel includes HDMI 2.1 and DisplayPort 1.4, so you can hook up a modern monitor or a VR headset without needing adapters. The USB-C port on the front can be useful for fast external drives or charging a phone while you game, which is a small convenience that adds up over a day of use. The special feature the manufacturer highlights is